Well, Bill and Jen, there was another area that we identified with the prepared wrench assessment that was a growth area, and it was the area of financial management. Okay, is that a surprise to either one of you?
Not to me.
Yeah. One of the things I'd like to do as we start to talk about it is start by just kind of sharing a little bit about your results. There were some things you agreed about, and then there were some things you disagreed about. Okay. One of the things that I thought was positive is in the assessment there's an item that read, we usually agree on how to spend our money. And you were both in agreement on that. In other words, you were kind of on the same page. And I thought that was positive. Okay? There was an item that there was disagreement on. And the item talked about being aware of your major debts and whether or not they were a problem for you. And now, Jen, you had some concerns about your debts. And Bill, your response kind of showed that that wasn't much of a concern for you, the debts. Can you guys?
No, I mean, everybody has debts.
How can that not be a concern? I don't get that at all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get how debt is not a concern for you, especially
Well, I mean, it's a
now
concern. It's just.
Well, but I mean, we have our daughter just started her freshman year of college.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know, we didn't really save a lot of money, but then, I mean, we did have kind of a nest egg going that I thought we were going to put toward college, and and you know what he did? I'm sorry, I got to bring it up. He bought a motorcycle, $20,000 motorcycle, and didn't even ask me about it at all. Typically we do agree on how to spend the money, but here is this huge purchase that happened under my nose, no discussion about it.
But the only reason it bothers you is because it was something that doesn't involve you directly. Like in order to spend money.
Because I don't ride, but it still involved me directly because it's money that we
You're
had
always
allocated
talking about
for
you want me to
something
spend
else,
more
though.
time with the family. Well, this is a perfect way for Josh and I to spend more time together, working on the bike.
Okay, see, that's another thing we haven't talked about is that, I mean, you don't even know how I feel about motorcycles. They scare me to death. You never asked me about that. That wasn't something that ever came up.
You're not
in
going to be driving it.
conversation.
I'm going to be driving it.
Okay.
So
I
why
care
does it
about
matter?
you, and so that scares me a little bit, but that never
So just
came
because
up.
you're scared of it, I'm supposed to not do anything with it.
Let me ask you something. I'm watching you two, and I just kind of held back on purpose there for a second because I want to see how you two deal with conflict when it emerges. Is this kind of how it goes when you're at home and an issue comes up like this?
Well, yeah, because
Probably.
she always looks at something as only in how it affects her, and if she doesn't take into account anybody else.
Yeah.
That's so unfair.
Yeah.
That's not true at all. I feel like in this situation, I was thinking about everybody else. I was thinking about Joelle at college, and I was thinking about our consumer debt, and I was thinking about the fact that you didn't even consult me on something
Jen,
like
let
this.
me ask you something. How long ago did this motorcycle purchase happen?
Last year.
Last year. Okay. And I'm guessing you guys have argued about this before.
I haven't.
Okay. Well, okay, but there's been some conflict. Okay. How does it usually end up when you're trying to resolve this issue at home? What typically happens? Does it get resolved?
No.
This has not gotten resolved. I am still mad about this because every time I want to talk about it, he just shuts off, and the only thing he says is, "But
it's
I
just
deserve
that I
it."
hate the idea that I have to defend how I spend every penny that I make.
Okay.
You know, I work really hard for my money. I don't question you on every purchase that you make.
I don't make $20,000 purchases, though.
You know what I noticed, you guys? Remember how we were practicing the communication skill of saying what you want or being the speaker and talking about your feelings and the other one listening. I see two people here both kind of talking over each other, trying to make their point, and it's kind of like it starts to just escalate. And I'm pretty sure that's not very productive for you as a couple. All right. In fact, I'm very sure of that. You know, I want to teach you some different skills in resolving conflict, but one of the things that's important is when to recognize that now's not the time. In other words, I watched you start to get more and more angry and more defensive as we were talking there. And it occurred to me this issue is going to be tougher to talk about when you're worked up like that. Okay, so we actually have an exercise. Can we put finances on hold for a second and turn in your workbook? There's an exercise called taking a timeout. It's in the conflict resolution section. It says how to take a timeout. It's a couple pages beyond where we were before. Okay. And it's not that I'm putting you in timeout like a bad child or something. This is a little different. This is, how do we know we need a timeout because we're likely to just do something damaging or unproductive for our relationship here if we keep having this kind of a conflict. Okay, does that sound like something that might be helpful to you guys?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that something you've ever thought about doing, is taking a timeout?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay.
The problem I see with this is that if he asks for a timeout, that he doesn't ever come back
Yeah.
to it. That's my concern.
And
with
that's not
this.
what this is. In fact, that's more of kind of just running away or withdrawing from the conflict. And that's not helpful. That leaves you feeling kind of abandoned, correct? Yeah. So that's not what this is about. Let me talk to you about how this works. There's a 5-step process here. And the goal is to recognize when you're headed down a bad path, and how do we regroup, take a few minutes, take some time, and get back on the right path to resolving something. Okay? So the first step is actually to recognize, when are we getting off track? How does it feel, even physically or emotionally for you, when you start to escalate and get worked up? What happens? Jen, could you say a little bit about what might be a way you could recognize that things are not working well for you personally in that conversation?
I lose control, and I feel like all I want to do is cry. And I can't find the right words to communicate, and then I'm sure I get defensive and am not being very nice either.
Okay. So one of your goals is going to be to learn to recognize when that, it's kind of like when that adrenaline is running and when you feel like crying and you start to lose the words, to, instead of continuing with the conflict at that point, to recognize, I might need a timeout right now. Okay? How about for you, Bill? What do you feel when things start to get heated?
I just get really frustrated.
Yeah.
And I can just feel my muscles just...
Yeah, I can see you're almost tensing here as you're describing it.
Yeah.
So you physically, it sounds like your body tenses, but emotionally there's a frustration that kicks in.
Right.
Okay. So your goal is going to be to recognize those signs that show you, hey, I'm headed down an unproductive path here.
But I don't feel like I'm headed down the unproductive path. I think...
Well, or to say, maybe to realize we are on a bad path here. Okay? I know the tendency is to want to blame right now, but let's just talk about this process. So I want you to be able to tune into yourself and recognize when you're starting to shut down or get too frustrated to have a productive conversation. Okay? All right. Now the next step is to actually request the timeout. And I'll tell you, there's 2 pieces to this that are important. The first one is that you request it for yourself. Okay, it's not very helpful to say, Bill, you need a timeout. That actually can escalate things even more, even if you think, internally, that he is the one who's getting out of control. If you get to that point where you recognize this isn't going well for me or us, to say, I would like us to take a timeout right now. I need a timeout. So that's the first step. Call it for yourself, not for your partner. And secondly, the person calling the timeout needs to help agree to when are we going to come back to the table. And this is the difference between what you talked about. It can't just be we're taking a timeout and we're going to blow off this issue and never talk about it again, hopefully.
That's my concern.
Yeah. It's, I need a timeout. Can we take an hour? Or I need a timeout. Can we talk about this tonight after dinner? You set a time for when you're going to resume the conversation. You see how that is very different than just saying, stop, I don't want to talk about this? Yeah. Do you get that?
You don't look like you're very happy about that. Would you agree to that? To set a time that we would come back and talk about it after we cool down?
I have no doubt that we'll continue talking about it.
Okay, so you're willing to come back to the table though, because
Sure.
I heard one of her fears is that you might withdraw and not want to come back to the conversation. So both of you need to be able to agree that okay, we'll take our time out, but we're going to resume. And so let's
Okay.
let's just try that. Let's hold that for now. Now the third part is kind of the helpful part personally. It's when you do then call your time out and take some distance or time from one another, getting in tune with yourself and saying, how do I calm back down? How can I relax, sort of recenter myself and get myself in a better mindset so we can continue talking about this difficult issue? What are some ways, Bill, that you think you might be able to relax or calm down? If, let's say you had an hour break from a conflict, what would you need to do?
Go right on my.
I knew you were going to say that.
Well-
That's okay. That's okay.
On your motorcycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know it's a little bit of irony here, but that's one way you relax.
Exactly.
Okay. Are there other ways too?
I'd rather pay for a therapist for you to relax. It would have cost less than $20,000.
Let's hang with me here, guys. Hang with me. I know, it sounds like that's a great way for you to relax, and yet when she hears the motorcycle fire up in the garage, it might make it even harder for her to relax and
If
calm down.
this is what we're talking
So,
about.
so you're saying that the way I choose to relax has to be amenable to her.
No, it doesn't have to be, but it might be helpful for us to add one or two other things to your list so that you have options, and that's not the only one. I mean, we live in this climate. There'll be times of the year where you can't go for a motorcycle ride, so what are you going to do at that point?
Go hit a bucket of golf balls.
Yeah, okay. And a bucket of balls.
Um,
Some guys like to even just watch TV for a little while. It helps them calm down. Or
that would be nice.
okay. Just getting some distance and some quiet, some space would help you. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. How about for you, Jen?
For me, it's some form of exercise. I
Okay.
get to go walk, or I don't really jog, but I go to the gym, and
Okay.
I have to be physical in some way
Okay.
in order to release all that.
Yeah. Good. That's great. That's great. So now you each are aware, starting to become more aware of when would I need to call a timeout, how would I call it, and what would I start to do to relax and calm down. Now, while you're doing the relax and calm down stage, that's the time to start to think about what would be helpful as I return. How can I get myself in a mindset that would be more productive? And there's a few bullet points here. Under step 4, try and identify what you are thinking and feeling that became so difficult. So you want to get in tune with how you're really feeling about this issue.
So don't ride the motorcycle.
No, it's all right. It's all right. He can have. He needs his ways too.
I
It's
know.
and then think about how you would actually use those I statements that we talked about in the last exercise. How would you present how you're thinking and feeling about things in a more productive way? Because what you were doing a few minutes ago wasn't that. It wasn't that healthy communication strategy that we talked about. And then another idea that I really like here at the bottom, two things. One is try and consider your partner's point of view. And then finally, just remind yourself that you're a team. You guys are a married couple. You've got kids that you love. And even though at times it seems like you're setting it up like you're adversaries, you really are a team. And so remind yourself of that and come back to the table with that in mind. How can we resolve this so that we both feel good about it? That's the kind of productive thing we want you to think about as you're taking your time out. Okay? Any thoughts on that? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yep, makes sense.
Good. Yep. The last one, let me just tell you, the last step is to actually just resume the conversation, this time using some of the skills that you've learned. And that's important because remember, if we don't resume the conversation, then it was just trying to sweep something under the rug. And an old colleague of mine said something that I really liked. He said, you know, anger never gets buried dead, it gets buried alive, and it comes back. So if we don't bury this thing the right way, it's just going to come back. And that's what this
So
is
what's the
about.
difference between taking a time out, like you're talking about,
Yeah.
and I mean, we're constantly taking a time out on this motorcycle thing.
Yeah, but I don't hear you coming back to the table in a real productive way. At least that's even what you modeled for me here. It was the bickering back and forth, the defensiveness, and having a hard time speaking and listening in a productive way. So the difference is now with these new skills, when you come back to the table, hopefully you're going to be able to do it in a way that works better for you. All right? So just review this and think about, you can take some notes on this page, whatever you need to do. But I'd really like you guys to try this even at home if something starts to come up and you recognize that need for a timeout. Okay?
Correct.
Thank you.